The Forgotten Fleet. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before the Xelarian exploration fleet. Their lead vessel, the Varkanos, glided smoothly through the void, its sleek silver body reflecting the dim light of a distant sun. On board, Commander Draktal stood with his arms crossed, his four eyes scanning the holographic display before him. "Another useless sector," muttered Lieutenant Xelvan, shaking his head. "There is nothing but dead space here." Draktal was about to agree when a sudden alert flashed across the control panel. A deep beeping sound echoed through the command deck. "Unidentified objects detected," the ship's AI announced. "Large metallic structures ahead." Draktal's eyes narrowed. "Magnify the image," he ordered. The holographic display zoomed in, revealing a massive fleet of abandoned warships floating silently in the darkness. They were enormous, much larger than any Xelarian vessel, but their surfaces were corroded, covered in rust and debris. Some ships were broken, others barely holding together. It was a graveyard of giants. The bridge fell silent as the officers stared at the ghostly sight. Then the silence broke into laughter. Xelvan smirked. "This is what we found. A bunch of ancient trash." Other officers chuckled, shaking their heads in amusement. A fleet so old it had rusted in space. How pathetic. Who could have built these primitive things? Another officer scoffed. Draktal, however, did not laugh. He felt a strange unease creeping into his mind. Something about this fleet didn't feel right. He had seen derelict ships before, abandoned vessels, destroyed warcraft. But this was different. This fleet was too large, too well-formed to be simple wreckage. "Scan for energy signatures," Draktal ordered. "Sir." Xelvan raised a brow. "These ships are ancient. There's no way." "Do it." With a sigh, the lieutenant followed the command. The scanners hummed as they reached out, analyzing the silent warships. A few moments later, an officer spoke, his voice uncertain. "Commander, I am detecting low energy readings from within the ships." The bridge fell silent again. "That's impossible," Xelvan muttered. "These things have been dead for centuries." Draktal's claws tapped against the metal railing. "Could there be survivors?" "Unlikely," the officer replied. "But something is still active inside them." A chill ran through the crew. The laughter was gone now, replaced by growing curiosity and fear. "Send a boarding team," Draktal ordered. Xelvan hesitated. "Sir, do you really think it's worth our time? Would you rather leave a potential threat unchecked?" Draktal replied coldly. The lieutenant had no answer. Inside the warship, the Xelarian boarding team approached one of the largest ships, their small transport docking onto its surface with a metallic clang. Captain Reltok led the team, his pulse rifle held tightly as they pried open an ancient airlock. The doors hissed, releasing a cloud of stale air. The inside of the ship was dark and silent, the metal walls covered in rust and dust. The only sounds were the echoing footsteps of the Xelarian soldiers. "Stay alert," Reltok warned, his voice hushed. They moved cautiously through the corridors, their flashlights flickering against strange, unfamiliar symbols etched into the walls. "Whoever built this ship, their technology was primitive," one soldier whispered. "Look at these old panels, these outdated controls." Then, suddenly, something clicked. The corridor lights flickered to life. The deep hum of machinery rumbled beneath their feet. The soldiers froze. "Commander, this ship is waking up," Reltok said into his comm. "On the Varkanos." Draktal's grip on the railing tightened. "Get out of there. Now." But it was too late. A low mechanical voice echoed through the ship. "Unauthorized entities detected. Activating defense protocols." The soldiers barely had time to react before the doors slammed shut behind them. Alarms blared. Metal panels shifted. The rusted ship wasn't dead after all. It had only been sleeping. And now it was awake. The mistake that woke the past. The alarm screamed through the corridors of the ancient warship, their deep mechanical wails vibrating through the rusted walls. Captain Reltok slammed his claw against the emergency override panel, but the doors refused to budge. "We're trapped," a soldier snarled, raising his rifle. "Stay calm." Reltok snapped, his eyes scanning the dimly lit corridor. The dust-filled air was now heavy with an eerie hum. Something deep inside the ship had come alive. On the Varkanos, Commander Draktal watched the live feed from the boarding team's helmet cams. The once lifeless vessel now pulsed with faint blue lights, ancient systems flickering back online. "How is this possible?" Lieutenant Selvon whispered. "It was never dead," Draktal muttered. "It was waiting." Inside the warship, Reltok motioned for silence, his soldiers tightening their grips on their weapons. The flashing red lights cast long, distorted shadows against the walls. Then footsteps. Metallic, rhythmic, inhuman. Something was moving. "Scanners up," Reltok ordered. The soldiers activated their bioscanners. The results flashed onto their visors. No life signs, yet the footsteps were real. Then, from the darkness, they emerged. Towering metal constructs, covered in rust, yet moving with deadly precision. Sentinels, humanoid war machines built in an era long forgotten. Their red optical sensors ignited like fire, locking onto the intruders. By the stars, one soldier breathed. Then, the machines charge. A soldier opened fire, blue plasma bolts slamming into the nearest sentinel. The blast tore through its chest, but the machine didn't fall. It kept coming. "Fall back," Reltok bellowed. The sentinels moved with terrifying speed, their heavy frames crashing forward like living war gods. One swiped at a soldier, sending him slamming against the wall with a sickening crunch. Another fired a burst of energy rounds, vaporizing a second soldier before he could scream. "They're too fast," someone yelled. Reltok gritted his teeth. This wasn't just old technology. These machines were combat-ready. They had never stopped being ready. On the Varkanos, Draktal slammed a fist onto the console. "Get them out of there." The ship's AI struggled to reconnect with the team's transport. Power surge detected. External systems being overridden. "Sir, the warship's systems are hacking our connection," Selvon shouted. Draktal's mind raced. This wasn't just an abandoned fleet, it was a trap. A trap set by who? Or what? Then, another warning flashed across the screen. More ships activating. Not just the one the team had boarded. All of them. Across the sector, thousands of ancient warships began to light up, their forgotten engines roaring back to life. And in the heart of the fleet, something far more terrifying stirred. Something watching. Something waiting. The awakening of the forgotten war. The cold silence of space shattered as the ancient warships roared back to life. Across the sector, once lifeless metal behemoths flickered with eerie blue light, their long dormant engines humming with renewed power. On the Varkanos, Commander Draktal stared in disbelief at the tactical display. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Selvon whispered. "These ships are thousands of years old. They shouldn't even have power." Yet, before their very eyes, the rusted fleet moved, not drifting, not malfunctioning, but maneuvering with deadly precision. Then came the signal, a message broadcasting on all frequencies, a voice deep, distorted, and undeniably human. "This fleet belongs to Earth. Identify yourself or be annihilated." Inside the warship, Reltok and his surviving soldiers stumbled through the dark corridors, their weapons useless against the relentless sentinels. Every turn led them deeper into the ship's labyrinthine halls, but the machines never stopped pursuing. "Where the hell is the exit?" one soldier shouted. "There's no way out," Reltok growled, scanning the area. The ship was guiding them somewhere. Then, the floor shook. A deep mechanical groan echoed through the ship's structure as a hidden blast door slid open, revealing a massive chamber. Inside stood something even more terrifying than the sentinels. A colossal war mech, its body covered in the scars of 1,000 battles. Its plating bore an insignia, one Reltalk had seen only in history records. A Terran symbol. This was a human battleship, one soldier murmured. No, Reltalk corrected, his voice hollow. This was a human empire. Then the mech moved. Its red optics ignited, and from the darkness, more figures emerged. Not just machines. Human warriors, clad in advanced exosuits, their weapons crackling with energy. Their eyes cold, awake, ready. Who dares trespass on Terran territory? One of them demanded. The galaxy trembles. On the Varkanos, Draktal barely had time to react before the comms exploded with distress signals. Commander, a comms officer shouted. The entire fleet, it's moving. They're locking weapons on us. Draktal's blood ran cold. This wasn't just an abandoned fleet. It wasn't a graveyard of forgotten ships. It was a sleeping giant, one that had just been awakened. And now, the galaxy would learn the truth. The war never ended. The humans just went silent. Until now, humanity's lost army returns. The silence was thick with tension. Reltalk and his soldiers stood frozen, their weapons trembling in their hands. Before them, the massive war mech loomed, its red optics glowing like dying stars. Around it, the human warriors stood still, too still, watching them with an unnatural focus. One of them stepped forward. His exosuit was sleek yet battle-worn, covered in faded insignias of a forgotten empire. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, cold, and absolute. You have trespassed on Terran war territory. Reltalk swallowed hard. We didn't know this was human space, he managed, though he knew the words sounded hollow. The warrior tilted his head, irrelevant. A second soldier raised his rifle slightly. We don't mean harm. Before he could finish, a metallic blur struck. The human warrior moved with inhuman speed, closing the distance in an instant. His fist slammed into the alien's chestplate, sending him flying into the wall. The impact cracked the metal behind him. He never got up. The other soldiers took an instinctive step back. Reltalk knew, in that moment, they were not negotiating. These humans were not just alive. They were still at war. A signal across the stars. On the Varkanos, alarms blared. The forgotten fleet had fully powered up, their ancient weapons locking onto every ship in the sector. Commander, Lieutenant Selvon choked out. They're transmitting something. Draktal turned to the main display, where a galactic distress beacon was now pulsing. Not just any distress beacon, one encoded in a long-dead Terran military encryption. And the message was clear. The Sol Dominion rises again. All enemies will be eradicated. Draktal's blood ran cold. The humans had never been defeated. They had disappeared. And now, after centuries of silence, they were coming back. The bridge crew turned to their commander, waiting for his order. But what could he say? What could anyone do? Draktal exhaled, eyes locked onto the countless warships now moving in perfect formation. This isn't an abandoned fleet, he whispered. This is an invasion force. The storm has begun. Back on the warship, Reltalk realized something far worse than their impending deaths. The ancient warriors weren't just reactivating their fleet. They were preparing for war. One of the human warriors raised a weathered helmet, placing it over his scared face. The visor hissed as it sealed, and when he spoke again, his voice echoed with the weight of centuries. Tell your leaders. The other warriors lifted their weapons, energy blades humming to life. The Terran Empire is not dead. The war mech roared to life, its massive frame shaking the chamber. Weapons unfolded from its shoulders, a sound like the opening of a forgotten tomb. It was only waiting. Then, chaos. The galaxy's worst fear comes true. The Varkanos shook as the first wave of alien warships dropped from hyperspace, their cloaking shields dissolving like mist under a rising sun. On board, the crew held their breath. It was impossible to count how many ships had emerged from the depths of that forgotten sector. Hundreds. Thousands. Commander Draktal stood at the command center, his eyes locked onto the screen. The signal they had intercepted earlier had not been an isolated event. This was a galactic awakening, and the rest of the universe was about to be caught in its wake. "Sir, the Sol Dominion fleet is moving towards the core systems," Lieutenant Selvon shouted, voice cracking under the weight of the news. "They're preparing for a full-scale assault." Draktal's fist clenched, but his face remained calm. The Sol Dominion, a name known in ancient texts as a vast human empire. The last empire to dominate the stars before the Great Silence. But now, the legends were coming to life. The Terran war machine was awake, and it was hungry. "We've made a terrible mistake," Draktal muttered, looking toward the stars. They had underestimated them. The Terran Empire strikes back. Back aboard the forgotten warship, Reltok and his soldiers scrambled for cover as the ancient warriors moved with terrifying precision. The soldiers couldn't process what was happening fast enough. One minute, the human warriors were standing still, and the next, they were in full combat formation, moving through the ship like it was their own home. One of the warriors aimed his weapon at Reltok, his voice cutting through the air like a razor. "You have no place here. The Empire is reborn." Before anyone could react, the soldier fired. The blast hit the wall behind Reltok, obliterating the metal in an instant. Reltok felt the heat pulse against his skin, and for a moment, he thought they were all dead. But the warriors weren't killing them. They were forcing them to flee. "Get out of here," Reltok barked, rallying the survivors. As the team ran deeper into the belly of the ship, they could hear the screams of other soldiers in the distance, those who weren't fast enough to escape the human warriors. But the ship wasn't just a dead relic. It was a fortress, designed to protect the humans' most powerful secrets. And it was awakening. The secrets of the lost fleet. In the deepest chamber of the warship, hidden beneath layers of ancient armor, Reltok's team found something that would change everything. A massive data vault hummed to life as they approached, powered by energy that shouldn't have existed for millennia. The soldiers scrambled to decrypt the encryption codes. "What is this?" One soldier gasped as the screens flickered, showing blueprints and documents that were impossible to comprehend. They weren't just blueprints for ships or weapons. They were plans for an entire galactic civilization. "The humans," Reltok whispered. "They didn't just survive. They evolved." And then they saw it. The ultimate weapon. The key to human dominance. "Activated," Reltok ordered, his voice barely a whisper. The vault clicked, and with a loud thrum, the weapon powered up. Reltok felt his bones vibrate with the raw power surging through the ship. It was unstoppable. The Terran Empire had crafted this as their last line of defense, and now it was ready to unleash its final fury on the galaxy. The beginning of the end. On the edge of the galaxy, at the command center of the Galactic Council, an emergency alert blared. The humans were no longer a myth. They had returned with the force of 1,000 suns. And now, the Council was faced with a question that would define the fate of all sentient beings in the galaxy. Should they surrender or fight? There was no answer. Because in that moment, the entire galaxy held its breath. No one had ever thought it possible that the Sol Dominion, the last empire to stand against all others, could come back. Yet, here it was. And the universe had never been so unprepared. The awakening of an empire. The human fleet, now fully activated, surged across the stars like a force of nature. Reltok and his soldiers, now back on their ship, watched in stunned silence as the ancient warships continued to launch from the forgotten fleet's vault. Each vessel, though weathered by centuries, seemed to hum with an unearthly power. "Are we ready to fight?" Reltok asked, his voice low and filled with uncertainty. There was no fear left in him, only awe. His second-in-command, Lyrosol, looked at him with grave eyes. They're not fighting us. They're preparing for something much bigger. The communication console blinked on, and a voice filled the room, human, but unmistakably different. To all systems in the path of the Terran Empire, you will bow or be erased. We are the first, and we are eternal. It was the voice of a king, but no king Reltok had ever encountered. These humans didn't just want to conquer. They'd wanted to reshape the galaxy. The power of the ancient machines. The humans had been gone for so long, but their legacy had never truly died. The warships, designed to be the pinnacle of military might, were still connected to a vast network of ancient technology. Technology that could control not just ships, but entire planets. As Reltok and his team ventured deeper into the warship, they discovered an enormous chamber, a control hub unlike anything they had ever seen. Rows of machines, once dormant, now began to light up, responding to some silent command they couldn't fathom. The machines hummed in unison, a perfect rhythm. A central figure stood at the far end of the room, a human in full armor, standing perfectly still like a statue. The figure was almost lifeless, but alive in a way that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Reltok felt his heart race. This was the human leader, or perhaps something more than a leader. This was their soul. "Who are you?" Lyrasol asked, her voice quivering. The figure raised a hand, and the whole room seemed to breathe in response. "I am the soul of the Terran Empire," it said, its voice echoing in a way that felt as though it was speaking through time itself. "I am the last remnant of the ancient kings. I have waited, and now the time for rebirth has come. The rebirth of humanity." Back in the galaxy's core, the Galactic Council met in panic. This wasn't just an invasion. This was the return of a god, an empire that had never truly fallen but had gone into a deep, unnatural sleep. It was a sleep they never thought would end. Do we fight?" One of the council members asked, his voice shaking. The leader of the Galactic Council turned to face them, her eyes narrowing. "We don't just fight. We beg for mercy. The Terrans are not just warriors. They are architects of the universe. If they decide to erase us, we will have no choice but to bow." But just as they were preparing to negotiate, a final message came through, one that would change the course of history. The message from the void. "We are coming. You will understand what true power is when we claim our rightful place. The sole dominion will once again be the center of the universe, and all who challenge us will be extinguished." It wasn't just a threat. It was absolute. Across the stars, all other civilizations realized something terrifying. The humans were not just returning to the galaxy. They were coming to claim it. The Great Decision. As the first wave of Terran warships moved through the galaxy like a tidal wave, Reltok knew they had to make a choice. Should they resist and fight the human empire? Or should they try to negotiate with the power that had just awoken, a power that could decimate them all? But as he pondered, he received a final communication, a message from the very heart of the Sol Dominion. It was from the human leader again. "You don't have a choice." The transmission ended. The last battle for the stars. The time had finally come. The galaxy trembled as the Terran Empire rose from the shadows of history, and Reltok stood at the helm of his ship, staring out at the vast expanse of space. The stars were dimming as the first of the human warships took their positions. It wasn't just a fleet. They were like an unstoppable storm, their power growing by the second. Reltok's mind raced. His crew could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the weight of the moment. For centuries, the humans had been little more than myth, a distant memory in the grand scheme of the universe. But now, their return was not just a physical force. It was something much deeper, an unyielding tide of inevitable change. "We're not just fighting for survival," Lyrasol said, her voice tense. "We're fighting for the future of the galaxy." Reltok turned to her, his face hard. "I know. And the humans, they don't just conquer. They reshape." The first clash. The storm breaks. The first clash came sooner than anyone anticipated. The Terran warships engaged the Galactic Council's forces in a battle so fierce, it shook the very fabric of space itself. It wasn't just weapons firing. It was a complete domination of tactics. The humans weren't just skilled fighters. They were geniuses at war. Reltok watched as the humans launched their first strike. The destroyers came out of nowhere, their cloaking fields rendering them invisible until it was far too late. In an instant, shockwaves rang out across the battlefield, sending enemy ships spiraling out of control. The alien fleets tried to retaliate, but it was like they were battling against phantoms. The human warships fired in perfect synchrony, as if the entire fleet was a single entity. Reltok's heart skipped a beat as the sheer precision of their movements was revealed. It wasn't just military might, it was an art form. The humans, they'd been planning this for generations, he murmured, watching as another massive enemy ship was obliterated in a flash of light. We've underestimated them. The heart of the Empire. As the battle raged, Reltok made a dangerous decision. He would infiltrate the heart of the Terran Empire, the central command of the human war effort. It wasn't just about stopping the war anymore. It was about understanding the true power of the Terrans. With his team, he broke through the outer defenses of the human stronghold, landing on an ancient moon that was said to house the human leader's last bastion. They made their way through the forgotten ruins, their footsteps echoing on the cold stone floors. The further they went, the more alive the place seemed. Strange, alien machinery hummed in the background. It was clear the humans had left nothing to chance. Each turn and twist brought them closer to the heart of the Empire's power. Then, at last, they arrived. A hologram flickered to life before them, a human figure standing tall, as if it had never left. The figure was the leader, the one who had been waiting for their return. "You've made it this far," the figure's voice echoed. "But it's too late. The Terran Empire does not need to conquer anymore. We simply reclaim what is ours." The revelation. Reltok's mind reeled as the hologram continued to speak, revealing the human's true purpose. The Empire was not just a power that sought to conquer. It was a force of nature that existed to restore the balance of the universe. For eons, the Terrans had been observing from the shadows. They were not the destroyers of worlds. They were the healers, the rebuilders. But only when the galaxy had reached the breaking point would they reclaim what was theirs. The other civilizations had destroyed themselves, their endless wars and greed tearing apart the very fabric of existence. And now, the humans were the only ones capable of saving the galaxy from its own destruction. "Your species," the figure said softly, "will not survive in the old way. You will either submit to our order or face extinction. The choice is no longer yours." Reltok's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just a war. This was the end of an era, and the beginning of a new one. The final choice. As the humans continued their relentless assault, one by one, the alien fleets began to fall back. The galaxy's greatest empires, once proud and unshakable, were forced to consider a choice they hadn't anticipated: bow before the Terran Empire or face complete annihilation. Reltok felt the weight of the decision on his shoulders. Should he lead his people into submission? Should they accept the rule of a new empire? Or was there still hope for resistance? As he stood, staring into the hologram of the human leader, he realized the truth. The galaxy had changed forever, and there was no going back. The Terrans had already won.